In this video, we're going to do 12.01 bubble points. All right, so I have it done already. Let me show you guys what we're building. All right, so we have a blue empty background, and when I click, it's going to bubble a point up. All right, and when I click another time, it's going to do that for a second one. Notice that when I keep clicking, it replaces the oldest one, and that there can only be two on the screen at maximum, right? So if I spam click, there's only ever two, okay? And the oldest one gets replaced. So this is the oldest one, and when I click, it's going to replace that one, right? Now this is the oldest one, and when I click, it's going to replace that. Now this is the oldest one, and when I click, it's going to replace that. Like so. Okay. So since this is a world program, hopefully you guys do your domain analysis. Draw the pictures so you can better understand the problem, all right? And don't keep it all in your head. So we have our constants, right? The width and the height and the background. That changing information is that the points are going to be moving up. And likewise, when we click, it's going to replace the oldest point. So here, this is 1 and 2. And when I clicked right here, it replaced this one with the one here, right? Now this is the newest point, right? This is the oldest point, and this is the newest point. And of course, we have the mouse X and Y moving, and we're clicking, right? That's the changing information. Here are the big bang options: on mouse, on tick, and to draw. We're going to do on mouse last, and I think I have it commented out, right? We're going to do that last because it's a little bit harder. Anywho, I have the file downloaded and open up in Racket. Let me just go to it, actually, like so. All right, so the constants are done for us, the starter file. So we have the width, which is 400, the height, which is 400, and this background, right, which evaluates to this blue background image because it's an empty scene with height blue, like so. Okie dokie. So let's just scroll down and look for problem A. All right. Design a world program that moves a bunch of points up. The program starts with no points until the user clicks. At max, there can be 2 points on the screen. Adding more than 2 points will replace the oldest point. Notice how the data definitions for point, none, single, and couple are done. That's a lot. We're going to review that. Complete the data design steps for a bunch of points. All right. So let's review what we have so far for all these. Point, none, single, and couple. Okay, so we have to define struct points, right, which has an x and a y. Those are numbers. You can make a point by calling the function makePoint, giving it two numbers, and the interpretation is where x is the horizontal relative to the top left corner, and y is the vertical relative to the top left corner, right? And we have point-x, give it a point, and it spits out a number. And point-y, those are the axis signatures. And likewise, here is a template for that. Okay, let's move on. This is a little more interesting. Define struct none, all right? So it has no fields, and you make one by make none, okay? And the interpretation, how should you interpret what this is? It represents where there is no points on the screen, right? So it's when we haven't clicked yet, right? We're not clicking at all. There's no points on the screen. It's just empty, right? This is what it represents, all right? So just keep going. Define struct single, right? Single is make single, and this field is a point. And it represents when there is 1 point on the screen, all right? So it just represents this case. There's 1 point on the screen, all right? So single -1, you give it a single, right? And it will spit out a point. That's the axis signature. And here is a template for that. All right, next is define struct couple, right? It has two fields, first and second. Both of them are points. You can make a couple of points by doing make couple and then giving it 2 points. And it represents when there are 2 points on the screen, right? So it represents this case right here when there are 2 points, all right? And here are the axis signatures for those and a template here. All right. So we have our 2 point examples right there, make point 5, 250, and make point 10, 330, all right? These are just the examples for this point definition here. Paste it down below because we're probably going to need them in this problem for problem A, all right? So problem A is that we have to do data design steps, right? You have to do the examples and the template for a bunch of points, all right? So pause the video and try to come up with some data examples for a bunch of points, all right? I'm going for spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right, so I'm assuming that you guys took a good swing at it. So now let's go over it together. Okay, so let's just come up with an example for all three of these. So make none is going to be, we'll call it nothing, make none. All right, so that is representing when there's no points on the screen. Let's do make single. So we're going to call this S1. All right, and make single. All right, and we have to give it a point. So let's give it one of our points here. So make 0.5 250, right? Like so. And that is this example done, right? I'm going to use the variable this time. So p-5 250, like so. All right. So that's that. And then define for a couple, right? We have to do, let's call it C1. And we have to make it a couple. And then it takes 2 points. So we'll give it P5 250, PT 5 250, and then we'll give it the other one, right? Like so. Okay, so if I run this, you guys can type in the variable names to see what it'll look like. So nothing is this make none structure. S1 is a make single that has a nested point in that. Okay, and of course C1 stores this make couple, and we see that it's the structure that contains 2 points, 2 make points inside them, with 5 at 5 250 and 10 3 30. Okie dokie, so that is pretty much done for the example step. Try to do the template step for bunch of points. All right, I'm over spoilers in 3 2 and 1. All right, so I'm assuming that you guys took a good swing at it. So now let's go over it together. So coming up for the template for a bunch of points, let's just write the signature for that. Bunch of points temp consumes a bunch of points, and we don't know what it'll produce yet because we're just laying out all the pieces that we might need. All right, points of points dash temp, right? Consumes a bunch of points. So what should we name this input parameter? Let's just call it bunch. All right, pretty descriptive of what this input parameter is. And likewise, since this is a one of, right, we need a cond that matches the amount there. So there's 3 up there, and there's going to be 3 cases down here for the cond. Since this is a union, we need to distinguish between all those 3 cases. So we have none ha. If is the bunch I'm given a none, then we probably want to do something. All right, so like so. And is the next case, right, is the bunch I'm given a single. All right, if so, then we want to get the single field out, right? So single dash 1 of the bunch. All right, likewise, since this is a nested structure, right, make single is a structure that contains a structure, right? So here's our make single. It is a struct, and inside it contains a point. This is a non-primitive data type, right? It's not a base type that comes with racket. It's a defined struct that we created ourselves. Therefore, we should probably wrap it around a helper function. So let's just do that. All right. So point dash temp. Okay. And likewise, let's move on to our last case, the couple. All right. What happens if the bunch I'm given is a couple? All right. We want to probably take it apart, right? So it's going to be couple dash first of the bunch, and then couple dash second of the bunch. All right. Likewise, since these are non-primitive types, we probably want to wrap them in a helper function. All right. It's just a general rule, right? You might not even need the helper function when you write the function, but again, the template step is just for laying out a good foundation and scaffolding. All right. So like so, point dash temp. And that is pretty much it for the template step for bunch of points. So that is problem A done. All right. So now let's move on to problem B. All right, gonna scroll down here. Okay, so it's a big one. Finish the function design steps for the following functions in order of easiest to hardest difficulty. Move up, drop point, bubble points, render, add point, click add. Comment out the on mouse big bang clause when you are finished with all. Okay, so let's just get started with move up. Try to follow these steps for move up. There are already some signatures and stuff given for us. So let's just get started with move up anyways. Here's the signature. Move up consumes a point and produces a point. The purpose statement produces a point with the y decreased by 1. Okay, so signature purpose, stub this out. So define move up, call it PT, spit out a PT. All right, so pause the video and try to come up with examples that fulfill this purpose of move up. Spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, gonna assume that you took a good swing at it, so let's go right together. So let's check, expect, move up. Let's give it a point since it consumes a point. We'll give it 5, 50, 5, 250. So what do we expect this to produce? Well, according to the purpose statement, we produce a point with the y decreased by 1. So the x stays the same. We decrease the y from 250 to 249, like so. All right, it's good. Gonna run the stub against our examples here. One example is mostly all we need. Just a mismatch, it's all fine. Gonna copy this out, comment out the stub. Is there a function that consumes a point that we can use as a baseline? Yes, there is. So we're going to use this. Scroll down like so. Copy and paste that down. All right. So pause the video. Hopefully this should be all the mental scaffolding needed for move up. Move over spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. Okay. I'm assuming it took a good swing at it. So looking at our examples and signatures, this has to produce a point. So this has to be a make point. And likewise, the x stays the same and the y gets decreased by 1. So this is that 250 subtracted by 1, like so. Gonna run and see if, forgot to rename this, the template function name. All right, there we go. And all the tests pass. Okay, let's move on to the next function, draw point. So here is the signature. Draw point consumes a point and an image and produces an image. And the purpose statement is that it draws a point on the given background, right? Signature, purpose, let's stub this out. I'm going to do that. Define draw point, call the given point input point PT, and then we'll call the input image BG for background. This has to produce an image. Let's just spit out the image that we're given. Okay. So pause the video and try to come up with examples for draw point. Spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right, I assume that you took a good swing at it, so let's go over it together. All right, so draw point. So check, expect, draw point. Got to give it a point according to the signature. All right, so we'll do one that's at 5 to 50 on top of the background. All right, we have to give it in a point and an image. Point in image. So this has to spit out an image of the point on the given background. All right. So we do a place image. All right. So we're turning this point structure into an image of a point, and that is an image of a circle. All right. Let's make the radius 5 and then solid gray. Right. And then we're going to place that at the point's coordinates. So 5 to 50. So 5 to 50 on top of the background. Background. Like so. Okay. So I'm going to run this against our examples. Get a mismatch in images here. That's fine. We just got to draw that gray dot over there, the gray point. All right. So I'm going to hide, comment this out. Okay, is there a template that consumes a point that we can use as a scaffold? Yes, there is. All right, so there is point-temp, like so. Okay, gonna paste that down for draw point. That's where it was. Rename this, like so. All right, now really pause the video. Hopefully this should be all the mental scaffolding needed for draw points. I'm going to go over spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right, so I'm assuming you took a good swing at it, so let's go over it together. All right, so looking at the examples here and the signature, we have to produce an image, and it looks like we have to place the image at, we have to make a circle, right? So place image, here's the documentation for it. So place image, consumes an image as the first argument, X and Y position, and then another image, which is the background. So, like so. All right. And so that is that. And then that is that 5, right? The points x, the given points x, right? And then the point y on top of the background. Okay. BG, this variable is not defined. Oh, yeah. Whoops. Signatures mismatch. DrawPoint takes in 2 arguments, the point and image. Our function definition only has that point. I forgot to put BG here. Okie dokie. And both tests do pass. All right, this test has passed and so does this one. Okay, let's move on to the next function. So bubble points is that next function, and it consumes a bunch of points and produces a bunch of points, and it moves all points up in the bunch of points. And here is the stub for that. So signature, purpose, stub. Let's come up with some examples over here. All right. So check expect bubble points. All right. So what is a bunch of points? This is one of those cases where you're gonna have to keep refreshing your memory as to what a bunch of points is. So they are one of these 3 cases. So what happens if it's a make none, right? Well, that make none is when there is nothing on the screen. All right. So make none. Okay. Bubble points make none. What do you expect this to produce, right? Try to, come up with the answer for that. Spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right. So it moves all points up in a bunch of points, but if there's nothing in this bunch of points, then really there's nothing to move. So we should just produce the make none again, right? Because this follows that signature, right? Make none is in the category of bunch of points. Okay. Let's move on to the next example. All right. So what happens if it's a single, right? Check expect bubble points make single. Let's say make point of 5 to 50. Okay. Because single, right? It has a point -1 that contains the point, right? So what do we expect for this function to produce? All right. Try to come up with the answer for this. Spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. Assume that you took a good swing at it. So, bunch of points, right? We have to move this make single down, right? Up, essentially, right? So, we have to produce a make single where the point is at 249. Okay, like so. Next is the final case, right? For bubble points. What happens if we're given a make couple? All right, so there are 2 points on the screen. How do we bubble them up? And those 2 points coordinates are going to be at, we'll say, make point 5 to 50. So that's the first point. Make point 10, 330. All right. Okay, so what do you expect this to produce, right? Spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. Well, this has to produce a bunch of points, and we're moving 2 points up, right? Bubble points moves all points up in the bunch of points. So if it's a make couple that we're given into this function, we should produce a make couple that is, because it's a bunch of points, and these points are going to be bubbled up, right? So instead of 250, it's going to be 249, and instead of 330, it's going to be 329, like so. Okay. So that is pretty much it for all 3 of examples for our bubble points. Okay, so I'm going to run this against our stub to make sure there are no mismatches. No syntactical errors. Looks like it's just mismatches. Passes this first test because all we're doing is spitting it back out. That's all good. Let's grab a template for a bunch of points that we scaffolded. All right, so bunch of points, bubble points. All right, since it consumes a bunch of points, we can use the scaffold. Rename this. Make sure that the arguments are correct. Number of arguments, bunch of points. Okay, so pause the video. Hopefully this should be all the mental scaffolding needed to solve bubble points. Over spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right, so I'm assuming that you took a good swing at it, so let's go over it together. So what happens if we are given a make none? Well, we are in this branch and we have to produce a make none. So we can just slap that down just from our examples alone. Okay. All right. So make single. All right. So what happens if we're in the single case, which is this test here, right? I'm going to space these down to give ourselves more room. All right, what happens if we're in this point here? Well, we have to reduce a make single according to our check here, check expect example, and signal is make single is in, it's a bunch of points, right? So make single, all right. And what do we want to do to this point, right? So we had the single point here, so this will get that out. It's going to be make point 5 to 50. Well, we want to move the y coordinate up, right? So we could do something like this, where we take the point dash type becomes point dash y. This makes single, right? Its field has to be a point, right? So I'm going to scroll that for you guys. So where is it, right? Single has a one field, and that one field has to be a point, okay? So we're right there. All right. So this makes single has a one field. This is that one field, and it has to be point. So make point, and then we can pass the point dash x as well. And then the y has to be subtracted by 1. All right. Minus 1. Okay. So this is a completely valid answer, but we have a function that already moves points up, right? We have a function called move point up, right? That produces a point with the y decreased, right? It moves the point up, and likewise, bubble points moves all points up in the bunch of points, right? The given bunch of points. So let's go back to where we were here, where it was point dash temp, and let's just give it a function that produces what we need, right? We want to move this point in the make single up, and then we're gonna produce a make single that moves it up. All right, so like so. Okay, so what is next for bubble points? Well, this last example over here, what happens if we're given a make couple, right? Well, we want to produce a make couple according to this example, and we want to bubble those 2 points up. All right, so go hit enter, space it down because it's getting hairy, and we want to move them up like so, and those will turn these 5 to 50 into 5 to 49, like so, right? Move up is going to handle that case. So I'm going to run this. Bubble points in name. Oh, I forgot to comment out the stub here. So there we go. And like so, all 5 tests do pass. Now let's move on to the render function. All right, so signature render consumes a bunch of points and produces an image. And the purpose is that it draws a bunch of points on a background. Okay, so define render bunch produces an empty image. All right, so that's the stub. Signature purpose stub. Let's come up with some examples here. So check expect. Let's say render make none. All right. So what happens if we're given a make none? Right. Well, we want to draw the bunch of points on a background. But what happens if there are no points? Well, then we probably just want to produce the background, right? So this should just produce the background. All right. So that's the one case done for a bunch of points, right? Bunch of points also is a make single. So let's do the next case, the next test. Render make single. And we're going to make a point 5 to 50. All right. So that's representing a bunch of points when it is a single point on the screen. All right. So what do we want? We want to draw the bunch of points on the background. All right. So we're going to do a place image here, because that's what's going to let us draw a bunch of points on a background. All right. So place image, and we're going to turn that point into a circle. That's 5 solid gray. All right. Where do we want this circle at? Well, we want it at the circle that is in the make point single here, right? That is wrapped around this. So at 5 to 50, 5 to 50 on top of the background. All right. Let's do the last case. So check expect. Render make couple. All right. So we're given 2 points. Make couple has 2 points. It contains 2 points. So we'll do a 5 to 50 again, and then we'll do another point. Make point. Make point. 10, 330. Okay. So this one draws 2 points, right? So I'm gonna run this off to the side. So this one here off to the side, so you guys can see what it'll look like. All right, so it's a point at 5, 250. Hopefully you guys can see that gray dot. It's a bit small on top of the background. All right, this time we want to draw 2. All right, so here's the trick we're going to use. All right, so what we're going to do is place image takes an image, an X and a Y, and then another image. Right, the scene is another image. So we're going to chain it. All right, so we're going to do a place image. We're going to place a circle. So this is for the first point. All right, where the first point of make couple, right, which is at 520. So it kind of don't know white spacing. Oh, that's why I was in the wrong parentheses block. So 5. Oh, I don't know why it's spacing down. So I'm gonna hit backspace and enter so it can space correctly. 250. All right, 5, 250, and then we want to draw that, right? This is the first argument to place image, second argument, third argument, and then the fourth argument, right, is another image. So we're going to chain that onto another place image of circle 5 solid gray. And this other chain, right, this second place image is the one that's going to be drawing the second point at these coordinates, right? So this first one, right, draws this circle at 550 on top of a place image that draws at another gray bubble at 10, 330. On top of finally the background. All right, so you can copy and run this here off to the side, right, like so. So there are 2 points, right? So one's at 5, 250, so that one's that dot, and then this 10, 330 is the second dot that's further along in Y. Okay, so let's run against our stub here, and we get image mismatches, but it's fine. All right, 3 image mismatches, but it's fine. It's just running against our stub to make sure that the examples are valid. And now let's copy a template because it consumes a bunch of points, and we did scaffolding for that. So let's just copy and paste this down for render. All right, and I'm gonna paste that down like so. Okay, so now really pause the video. Hopefully this should be all the mental scaffolding needed to solve rendering a bunch of points. All right, I'll go over spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right, I'm assuming that you guys took a good swing at it. So now let's go over it together. So looking at the first example, what happens if it's a make none? Well, we would just want to produce the background. So let's just do that like so. All right. And then next, what happens if we are given a make single? All right. So if we're given a make single, we're in this branch now that checks if it's a single, and we want to do a place image such that we take the point X and Y, right, place image, and then the circle comes next. All right, so I'm gonna space this down. All right, and then the X and Y comes next. So this point dash temp is gonna be copied twice. Actually, we're gonna need this twice, one for the X and one for the Y. So one for the X and one for the Y, point dash Y of the single one bunch, right? So single one dash bunch will get that point out, right? So here it is, right? Single dash one. There's the axis signature. So if you scroll up, you guys can find it. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do that. And then this will get that point out. And then we get the point dash single dash one will get this out. And then we can do point dash X and point dash Y on it, like so, all on top of the background, according to the example. All right, all on top of the background. So place that 5250, and this is that 5250. Okay, so now we are at the last step. Okay, so we have to do a place image here, where the first argument is going to be the circle. All right, and well, we're going to need the X and Y of the first point, right? The 5250. We'll want that here. So this is that first point, right? Couple dash first gets to that first point. And we want to take the X and Y, point dash X and point dash Y of that. So point dash X, point dash Y to that. And as we look at our examples, right? First argument, second, third, fourth argument to this first place image has to be another place image call. So first, 2, 3. Fourth argument has to be another place image call. All right. And we want to place another point. So this is where that setting point at 10, 330. So this will get us that point, 10, 330, right? And I have to move this actually into that block. So like so, and we want the point dash X and point dash Y out of that. X and Y, like so. Okay, of the second point. And all on top of the background. I almost missed that. If we run this code, it should tell us though that that is the failing test, right? Yeah, the last one is that failing test, all on top of the background. So let me just give it that background as the final argument here. All right, so I see my parentheses correctly. Background, yes, I want you inside this place image block. Okay, like so. All 8 tests do pass, and we are good for the render function. Before we move on, let's do our test review and refactor for a render image, because hopefully you're, typing this out and you're seeing a lot of similarities. Circle 5 solid gray, circle 5 solid gray, circle 5 solid gray. 1, 2, 3. We're seeing a lot of repetition here, guys, right? And likewise, I think the draw point also has that up here, right? So what we'll do is we can put that in our constants, right? So we're going to put it all the way up here because there's a lot of repetition, and we can factor it out into a variable. Circle 5 solid gray, because it's being repeated a bunch of times. So we're going to control find and replace this like so with bubble, like so, and then we're going to start replacing them, all right, with the variable name instead. And like so. Don't want to replace that because we don't want to end up with that. All right, Control Z to undo that. All right, if I run this code, all the tests still pass the same, right? We just made it a little cleaner by factoring out all these circle gray, circle 5 solid gray, all right? So that's one factorization out. Another one we can do is, well, look at this, place image bubble point X, point Y onto the given background. This draws a bubble on the given background at the point's position, right? We have a function that does that, right? We did it with draw points, right? It places an image of the bubble on the given point X, point Y onto the given background. So since those two do the same thing, right? We can replace this whole thing with draw point, give it the point itself, right? So single dash 1, right, is that point itself because it's the input parameter to a bunch of points. Single dash 1 of the bunch will get that point out, all right? And then we pass it the background, all right? So we can get rid of this whole block. And if we run our code, since we wrote tests for this, if it passes our tests, it is the exact same, right? It produces the exact same result, just less code. Okay, so we can also do the same thing for here, all right? Like chaining place images, right? We can chain draw points, giving it the, this draw point consumes an image, and that is the background, all right? So we can just do that. So let's do draw point at the first given point. So couple dash first, we'll get that first point in the couple, right? And we'll space this down like so. And then we'll chain it onto another draw point that draws the second given point. And then the argument to this second draw point, nested one, right? It takes an image, so we'll give it the background. And we can delete this like so. Okay, gonna delete it. And since we wrote tests, we run it and it passes the test, well, then it's the same behavior, just less code. And if you're confused about what this does, I recommend, you use the stepper, copy and paste the parts that are relevant to a new file and play around with it, all right? What we're doing is doing a draw point of, let's say, make point 5 to 50, right? This draws 1 point onto the background. All right, but what we're doing is making the background of this first one another call to draw point, where it's a make point, let's say 200, 300, and then this one is also going to be drawn on top of the background. So the background for the first call is this call, this one, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Recommend you use the debugger, copy and paste this, and step through it in a debugger if you are confused, right? This is how you draw and chain images together. Okie dokie. So that is it for render points. Okay, now let's move on to the next function. So let's do the next function, add point. It takes in a bunch of points and two numbers, which are the x and y, right? And it produces a bunch of points. And if bunch of points is a couple, the oldest point should be in the second position, right? The oldest point should always be in the second position if it's a couple, all right? If we're making couples, all right? Signature, purpose, stub. Let's come up with, wait, there is no stub, so let's come up with a stub actually. So define point bunch x, y, and then this has to produce a bunch of points. So we'll just spit out the bunch that we're given. All right, let's go with some examples here. Check, expect, add point, make none, because that is one of the bunch of points. And we're going to say, I don't know, 2030 is the x and y. All right, we want to add a point to this make none at 2030. So what do you expect this to produce? Right, this has to produce a bunch of points. So what do you expect this to produce? Trying to come up with the answer. Spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right, I'm assuming that you took a good swing at it. So has to produce a bunch of points. We are adding a 2030 point. So this make none represents, again, this empty screen, right? And when we click, right, this add point is going to add a point. So we're going to turn this make none into a make single, because again, bunch of points is, one of make single, make couple, and the none, right? So make single, again, has a make point 2030. All right, the first field to make single is a point. All right, it's easy to forget the signatures. You have to keep refreshing your memory as to what they are. In this case, I memorized it, but nonetheless. All right, so if we add points of make none 2030, then well, we want to produce a make single that has that 2030, make point 2030 of these x and y. Okay, let's move on to the next example. So check, expect, add point, make single, right? Let's just give it this point. I'm going to copy and paste the previous one. And let's say the x and y are that 50, 60. Why not? Okay, so what should this produce? You want to add a point when there is one point existing, all right, at 50, 60. You want to add a 50, 60 point, a point at x and y of 50, 60 onto a world, right, a bunch of points where it's a make single, right? What do we expect it to produce? It has to produce a bunch of points. Spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right, I'm assuming you took a good swing at it. So let's refresh our memory as to what a bunch of points is, all right? So a bunch of points is either, let's say a bunch of points is either make none, make single, or make couple, all right? So we're adding a point here to make single. Therefore, we have to turn this make single into a make couple, and this is one of bunch of points, okay? So it is one of bunch of points. So it's still in the classification. So the signatures aren't breaking here, right? So make couple, okay, and we're going to do the first point like so, right? And then we want to add the 50, 60 onto another make point 50, 60 like so. Okay, so that is that done. Wait, we're not actually fully done yet though, because if you look at this here, if bunch of points is a couple, the oldest point should be in the second position. So we're adding a point 50, 60 to this one, right? So when we do a make couple, the oldest point, which should carry through this make single, should be in the second position here, all right? Like so. So that's what it should be. And the new point that we want to add, 5060, should be in the first position of make couple. Okay, let's do one more test for good measure. All right. So we do check expect add point. All right, we're going to do make couple. Let's just use this one that we had before. So going to copy and paste up. There we go. This down. All right, what happens if we want to add a point when it's already a couple points and we want to keep adding another point here? Let's say at 80-50 this time, right? Like so. All right, well, what do you expect this to produce? Spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. Well, since, you know, we can't go overboard, right? You know, bunch of points is only a none, a make single, and a make couple. We're going to have to, you know, delete one of these points that were given in, all right? So we have to produce a make couple. So make couple, right, with one of the points deleted because we have to make room for this 80-50. In fact, I'm just going to copy and paste this down. All right, we have to produce a make couple where the oldest point should be in the second position. So this is the oldest point, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to delete it, and then this one will take its place, right? The first one is going to take this place. And then the new point is going to be 80-50, right? It's going to be in the first position of this make couple structure. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. Okie dokie. So if I run this, there are a lot of parentheses here, so hopefully nothing against the stub. Should expect this function is not defined. This is why we're running this sub against our examples. All right, to catch errors with the examples themselves, control run, and we get mismatches, actual value mismatches, so it's fine. Gonna comment out the stub here. Okay, and then I'm gonna copy a template for a bunch of points because we did the scaffolding for that, so might as well use it. So where is it? A bunch of points here. Add points. That's what I meant. Add point, like so. Always easy to forget that we have to match the signature. Bunch of points takes, add point takes in 3 arguments, the bunch of points. And also the template has to be expanded to include the X and Y, right? Adds a point at the given X and Y. So those are that X and Y. Okie dokie. So now pause the video. Hopefully this should be all the mental scaffolding needed to solve the problem for add points. I'm going to go with spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right, so I'm going to assume that you took a good swing at it. So now let's go over it together. So first example, add point. What happens if we're given a make none and we want to add a point to that 2030? Well, we have to produce a make single such that we have to make a point, because make single, its first field is a point of the given X and Y. Okay, so this is that 2030. All right, next example, single bunch, right? So this one, all right. So add point to make single. What happens if we're given this? Well, we have to reduce this make couple. Gonna hit Control I to reindent it, right? Always be looking for that because it's a little off. Okay, so we have to produce a make couple, like so. All right, and then we want to have so we're given a single, right? We're given this single, and that single already has a point, and we want to produce a make couple where the single one, right, is going to be in the second position of this make couple because it's the oldest point, and we're adding a new point at 50-60. The purpose statement says if a bunch of points is a couple, the oldest point should be in the second position. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so make couple. So we don't need this wrapper around point-temp actually. All right, the template just says we could use it, but don't have to use it. All right. All right, so this is going to be that oldest point. So like so, and we have to do one for the newest point that we're trying to add in, this 50-60, all right? So make point 5060. Oh, not 5060, x and y, the given x and y, right? So this 5060 is going to be the x and y. We want this 5060 to be the first point, and this make single that contains the point, you want this to be in the second position of make couple. So that's what we're doing. So that's what we're doing. Single bunch is in the second position of make couple. Okay, so finally, we're at the last case, right? So what happens if we're already given a make couple and we want to add a point of 8050, right? Well, we have to produce a make couple. All right, hit enter and hit Control I. Okay, just so we can see clearly. And this has to produce a point where this one is moved downwards, right? Deleting this make point 230 and adding a 850 point in the first argument to this make couple. All right, a lot of moving parts here. So we don't really need these point dash temp. That's what the template said, but we don't always have to use everything. We sometimes end up deleting things. So like so. We don't really have to pass it to a helper function. All right. So you want to take the oldest point, right, and delete it. And this is that oldest point. This make point 2030 is gone. And that couple first is going to take its place. And of course, we want to take that 850 and squeeze it in to the first slot of this make couple. So point of the x and y, and that is at 850. Okay, so that was a ton of things to do. Let's just hope it runs and passes all our tests. And so it does. Okay, so that is pretty much it for add point. Let's move on to the next problem, click add. Okay, so here's click add. Before we do that, let's look at our main function. All right, on mouse, click add. Right, it's commented out. We have to finish writing the click add function. All right. But we can run this, since we're done with bubble points and render and all the functions that it uses, we can actually play around here with main. So main takes as its first argument a bunch of points, and bunch of points, one of those things is a make none. So make none. All right, this is when there's nothing in the world. All right, so like so. All right, what happens if I make a main make single where I give it a point? Let's say, 200 and then the height all the way at the bottom of the screen, right? Well, there is a point that floats. I'm clicking, nothing happens, is not spawning the points, right? That's, the function that we had to do for the click add, right? But this works, right? We can also, do a main make double, it wasn't double, it was make couple. Whoops. And then it takes 2 points, so we can do a make point, 200 height, and then we'll do another one, make point, 100 height. Okay, and those are 2 points that are moving up, all right? So always be paying attention as to what you can play around with, right? Because we finished all these functions. We can just, they consume and produce things in these check specs. So we can, just render them and render, make single of point, make point of 20, 300, right? Yeah, you can just play around with it as long as you call it correctly with the correct arguments, right? This consumes a bunch of points, so you can call it make single, make none, make couple, and etc. All right, back to our scheduled programming of click add. All right, so click add consumes a bunch of points, 2 numbers, and a mouse event. And it produces a bunch of points. So this is a mouse handle event, right? And you had to go to the website, right? So here it is, handle mouse. All right, this will be linked in the description. And this is what it does, okay? It consumes the world state, this mouse X, mouse Y, and then the mouse event. And likewise, there's also the same documentation here in you have to search it here. Handle mouse, but I'm not going to do that for the sake of time. So here's consumes a bunch of points, mouse X, mouse Y, produces a bunch of points. Purpose statement adds a point to the world on mouse click. Hint, here's a huge hint, use add point, and then to do function design, right? So signature, purpose stub. So this isn't stubbed out yet, right? Because it's not producing a bunch of points. So we can just stub this out really quickly. All right. So, okay. Next, let's come up with some examples. Check add. So we'll do a make none. And what happens if we do a, let's say the mouse is at 20, 300, and then the event is button down, all right? And if you don't know what these mouse events are, you have to go to the website, right? You have to go to the documentation and then look up, Big Bang, because it's in here. Handle mouse. Is it handle mouse? What is it called? On mouse, on dash mouse, on dash mouse. Right. So here it is. Right. Here's the mouse event. It's one of these strings: button down, button up, drag, move, enter, etc. Okay. So this is when the user's clicking, right? The string button down. Big Bang is going to call us with button down, right? A mouse event button down. What happens when we do this, right? Check expect, actually. And then click add. My bad, I was zoning out there. All right. What happens when we do this? Well, we're clicking the mouse and we want to add a point to this make none at 200, 20, 30, 100. That's where the mouse is, all right? So we will turn this make none into a bunch of points. And that bunch of points, right? This is that empty screen, the empty blue screen, right? We click where the mouse is, we want to reduce a make single. Make single. And then at 2300. All right. Like so. Right. That is the production of a bunch of points. All right. So you can do the example for make single and make couple. You recommend you do that if you don't understand the problem here. All right. But I'm just going to run for the sake of time. I have to move on. Make single expects only one argument but found two. Oh yeah, that's right, because make single takes in the point, right? So make point, right? You would have to go scroll up. What is a make single, right? Make single, right? And it consumes one argument, and that is the point itself. Single struct has one field, and that is the point itself. I was giving it two arguments, like so. Okie dokie. So run. That's why we have a stub here. Run against our examples. Mismatch, it's fine. All right, I'm just going to turn this into the template. So we want to probably do something with these given parameters, right? And likewise, like so. Okay. So this should be templating it out. All right, we have all the pieces. Now, how do we use those pieces to accomplish this? All right, spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. Pause the video and do it on your own. All right, I'm assuming that you took a good swing at it, so let's go over it together. Okay, so it says the hint says to use add point, and that's what we want to do, right? On mouse click, we want to use add point. So we wrote the function add point, right? And it consumes a bunch of points, a number and a number, right? And those are the X and Y coordinates that we want to add it to. So let's just call it with that, right? So add point, that given bunch, that's getting from this. I'm going to space this down. It's getting a bit confusing. All right, at the given X and Y, and then we don't need this mouse event there. All right, that's how you call this function. All right, otherwise, all right, what happens when the user's not clicking, right? What happens, right? This is when the user's clicking. What happens if the user's not clicking? Well, we just want to produce the same bunch of points, right? We're given a bunch of points, so we'll just spit it back out. All right, and you should have wrote an example for this if you were confused as to what we needed to do. But anywho, that is about it. It should run our test here, and they do pass. Let's comment out the comment over here that commented out on mouse clause, since we're finally done with click add, right? And let's run it. All right, now we didn't run a test for this. It's fine. All right, for the sake of time, I recommend you do that. But anyways, let's call this one make none. And everything should work. All right, so if I click, it spawns a point, adds a point, that floats up. And if I click again, it adds another point that floats up. And if I click the oldest point, this is that oldest point, it's going to get removed like so. All right. So oldest keeps getting removed. And there's always 2 points on the screen. 1, 2, that's the oldest. There we go. Now that's the oldest. There we go. All right. And that is about it for this one. And I will catch you in the next one.